Okay, so my name is Fahad. Fahad Mullaji is the full name, and I started exploring. In this talk, I'm going to talk about Blazor. First, I'll talk about what Blazor is and why it's awesome, and then I'll talk a little bit about the authentication which comes out of the box with Blazor, and then what you can do to make it custom. So the authentication which comes out of the box is it uses entity framework core and the code first approach. So sometimes it doesn't fit with your existing project, and it gets difficult to migrate that project. So I'm going to talk a little bit about custom authentication for both Blazor server and WebAssembly applications. And then I'm going to talk about how you can achieve authorization in your Blazor server too. So let's first get started with talking what Blazor is and why it's awesome. So when ASP.NET was released back in 2002, I believe, they wanted to make pages dynamic. They wanted to have that post back, and so that you can create a dynamic application. So browser is connected to a server where .NET runtime is running, and a request is sent to the server, and the response is shown on the pages. So that's how it is. It was set up. But with JavaScript evolving and these cool UI frameworks like Angular, React, and Vue, we could use the browser features, and we could use some of the processing power, most of the processing power of the browser. So you could distribute the computing on a different machine instead of making your servers beefy and paying for your servers either through cloud or virtual machines and maintaining your server. So you could divide your computing when you're creating dynamic web applications. So, developers started using Angular, React, and Vue. So to get into the game, ASP.NET also released Blazor for that. But unlike Angular and Angular, React, Vue, these UI frameworks, these frameworks use JavaScript, and they have this component model to you can make components and reuse them, but they use JavaScript, and if you like TypeScript, you can use TypeScript. But what Blazor wanted to do, Blazor wanted to bring in C# in the browser, which sounds very challenging, and I believe it must have been challenging because they wanted to bring in C# people who are not comfortable with JavaScript, people who have been coding in C# and they want to stick with only one programming language, because C# in some way it's a little better than JavaScript in my opinion, because I feel like following solid principles and using OOPS concepts like abstraction or overriding your methods, things like that gets easier with using languages like C#. So they wanted to make this UI framework where you write most of your code in C#. And the way they achieved it by .NET team achieved it by using WebAssembly. WebAssembly is basically a bytecode which runs natively in the browser. So .NET team compiled .NET Runtime into a WebAssembly and they pushed it on the browser. And now .NET Runtime is running in the browser. Now, as the .NET Runtime is running in the browser, we can use C# and execute our code in the browser. We don't need JavaScript to do that. And that's what Blazor is. Blazor uses WebAssembly, which is in your browser, and on top of that, you can make Razor components, which could be used across your application, and it communicates with the DOM. And performs UI operation. You don't have to go to your server to perform UI operation. In MVC or in web forms, you had to every click you have to go to the server. You had to go to the server and bring in data and show it on the browser. But with Blazor WebAssembly, you don't have to do that. There is one disadvantage with this approach, and I think it is with all the UI frameworks like Angular, React, Vue, all of them. And it could be bypassed, but some people are not comfortable with writing authentication code and pushing it on the browser. And that's the reason why .NET team came up with Blazor Server, where you keep all the code on your server, Razor components, .NET Runtime, your ASP.NET Core is also running on the server. And then your browser makes this thin client, SignalR thin client, which is a real-time connection that you make from browser to server. And the response is pretty immediate. It's not like HTTP post back, where you make post requests and you get the SignalR is it opens a WebSocket and it makes that connection, and the response is pretty quick. So there are two flavors. There is Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly. So that's what Blazor is. So I'm gonna create two applications here, which are like getting started. But when I create them, I'm going to enable authentication, which comes out of the box. And I do have a couple of projects that I have made. I make videos on YouTube, and I have made these videos. I have made this application on the video series. So if somebody wants to go and see from the scratch how these applications are made, you can do that too. But before I show those applications, let's first create a Blazor server application, which does have authentication support in it. For that, I'm going to open my Visual Studio 2019 and create a new project. I'm going to select the Blazor application here as a template and name my application as server auth, because we are going to create Blazor server application. And let's select a proper folder, .NET Meetup, so that it annoys me if it goes somewhere else. So I'm going to click on create, and when I click on create, it'll give me two options. One is Blazor server and Blazor WebAssembly. Blazor server makes this SignalR connection with the server, and Blazor WebAssembly runs natively on the browser. So I'm going to select Blazor server. I have .NET 5 installed on my machine. You can create Blazor server application if you have .NET Core 3. 3 or 3.1. But if you're creating Blazor WebAssembly application, you need at least, there was a template that you could install for 3.2, but I think you should have latest .NET 5 in order to create Blazor WebAssembly. I'm going to start off with creating Blazor server application, but in this right-hand side, this authentication, no authentication has been selected. I'm going to click on change here and select individual user accounts here, and then select store user account in-app. You can connect to cloud and store there too, but I'm going to do this in-app for this demo, and click on OK, and then click on create. This will create a project for me which has authentication support included in the template. So basically, if you're creating an application from the scratch, I think this is the best way to go. If you don't have any database or like users, you just want to create an application for a small project, I think this is, you can just like create this application. And we'll talk about custom authentication when we talk about the application that I created on YouTube series. So let's run this first, and then I'm going to talk about what's happening in the project, and then we'll move on from there. So I'm going to here run .NET run, and that will, I have opened my developer PowerShell here, and that's going to build my project, and hopefully it'll run it on localhost 5001. I'm going to copy that. Oh, it's going to stop the server. So I'm going to right click and copy that, and then go to that application. So this is pretty typical ASP.NET Core application where you get home, and then you hit counter, you can click on it, and you can fetch data. One thing that I want you to notice is that whenever I'm navigating, the page is not reloading. Whenever I'm clicking on a button, the page is not reloading like it does in ASP.NET MVC or web forms. It does create this thin client, which I would like to show. Let's go to, I think, network. And if I go to WebSockets, maybe it's in the application sources. But if you go to console, you can see that it creates this WebSocket connection with this ID, and it's making that connection, and then you can perform your UI operations, and it's getting incremented. I knew where it was, but I can't seem to find it. But maybe I'll find it later and I'll show you how it is. So this is pretty typical application. If I wanted to see where these pages are, then I can go to the pages folder, and we have this counter where it's you click on it and it increments the count, and then data gets bound again, and the incremented count is shown. Fetch data, we are injecting a forecast, and then forecast service, and we are making a get forecast async method call, and then that data is shown on HTML table here. And index page is pretty simple. We have just welcome to new app, the hello world application. Hello world is shown on the index page. But what we are interested in is the sign up and login page. I'm going to click on sign up here, register page. And it will, one thing that I want you to notice is, I'm going to make this a little smaller. And when I'm navigating between these pages, the page is not reloading, because it's making that signal R connection, and it's very fast. It's real time. We don't need to reload our application. But as soon as I click on register, you can see that the page got reloaded. We can even maybe see the network traffic here. Network traffic, maybe negotiate. I'm trying to find that signal or connection here, but that's okay. Okay, so if I go to my network tab and click on register, you can see that there is some traffic going on. If I go back and click on these other pages, then nothing happens. If I click on these pages, nothing is happening. If I click on register, then it's making that a network call. The reason why it's doing that is because it is using Razor pages to show your sign up page, and this is what it comes out of the box. If you add authentication support and create a ASP.NET MVC application, this is what you get to. So here I'm going to create a user, John Smith at gmail.com, and then use a very secure password and click on register. When I click on register, it's gonna throw an exception and say that this is the database is not existing. You'll have to apply migrations, and then you'll be able to store your user in the database so that next time you can log in into the system. One thing that I don't like is you cannot open database ASP.NET server auth and this long name of the database, which I'm not a big fan. But if you want to change that, you can go to app settings, and here in the connections, it has this default connection, and it's trying to create this database with name ASP-server auth- so many other things. So you can remove this if you don't like that. And I'm going to remove ASP.NET too. I'm going to save that file. And now if I refresh the page, then it only says server auth. So what now this page is, what this page is trying to tell us that you're trying to create a user, but there's no database. But I can create that database by clicking on this apply migration. So if you know ASP.NET, if you know Entity Framework Core, there are two ways you can deal with the database. There is a code first approach and database first approach. In code first approach, you'll have to apply migrations, and in database first approach, you scaffold the database, you reverse engineer the database. So before I click on apply migration, I do want to show you where those migrations are. For that, I'm going to go to this data folder, and you can see this migration folder, which came out of the box. It created those migrations for us. And if I click on this create identity schema, it's creating a lot of tables so that it can store our users. It's creating ASP.NET roles, ASP.NET users, and role claims, and user claims, user logins, all those tables it's creating and making that relationship. So if you're using code first approach, you create you create a database set, and then you make relationships in your models, and then you apply those migrations to either package manager, or you can use Entity Framework Core CLI tool to apply those migrations. But if you don't have to do that, we can directly click on this apply migration. The migrations do get applied, and it's saying that now try refreshing the page. If I click on refresh, it's going to say that registration is completed. I can click here to confirm the account. Now, if I go to my local DB, this is my MySQL Server Management Studio. Here, if I open the database, it created this server auth database. It just now created it. And it created with the tables, which are ASP.NET role claims and user claims, all the tables that we just saw. So this database wasn't there. I'm going to delete this one so that I can show you that it does get created the next time I talk about WebAssembly. But it created the server auth database that we named in our app setting here. server auth, and it created that. And if I go back to my application, now it did not sign in my user, but I can go to login scheme here. And for John Smith, I'm gonna enter his password and click on login. And I'm not gonna apply that. And you can see that John Smith is now logged in my system. If I go to different pages, then also I can see John Smith. If I click on logout, John Smith gets logged out. If I want to log in back again, I can log in with John Smith again. And I again get logged in with John Smith. If I go to my database and open my ASP.NET users, there will be only one user because that's the only user that we created. That's John Smith. Okay, so this is how it is working. We created a Blazor server application. We added authentication support. We, launched the application, and we were able to, change the name of the database, apply migrations, create a user. User gets created in the database. Let's see how it works first. So the first thing that I want you to notice is in the startup class, you'll have to add these two lines, which are ASP.NET, which is app.authentication and authorization. And those get added as you create this this application with which comes out of the box with authentication. And this is something that you'll have to add. And then you'll have to create a authentication state provider. And you'll have to add that as a scope reference in your application. And this authentication state provider for this application is revalidating identity authentication state provider here. So if I go to this this class, you can see that it's inheriting from revalidating server authentication state provider, and then it uses validate authentication state to validate the user and validate security stamp with it. I am not going to dive deeper into this because I want to talk about how custom authentications work. For that, I'm going to close this project, and I want to talk about how custom authentication, if you had to do it through custom authentication, how that would work. For that, I do have this project that I created, which is Blazor server application. I'm going to open that. This application, when I created this application, I did not have authentication added to it, but I added my own authentication, my own database tables. I wanted to have that full control because let's say if you're migrating a system and that system does not have, you did not use ASP.NET identity for that. You did not added authentication support for that, and you want to migrate your system. You don't want to change the database structure. You just want to migrate, and you want to use custom authentication for that. So the way this project is structured is I have a web API which is connected to a database, which is going to deal with the database operations. Before I jump into the project, I want to show some slides here, authentication state provider. So there are some advantages and disadvantages that I talked about. The disadvantage of out of the box is you have to go with Entity Framework Core. It does not support API design, and it uses Razor pages, and it's difficult to migrate if you already have the users. And there are some advantages too. But if you want to do custom authentication, you can follow these steps. You can, add app.use authentication and authorization in your startup class. You can inherit from authentication state provider, and in app.razor, you have to add these components in order to pass authentication state, and you'll have to make some UI changes in order to figure out if the user is authenticated or not. So I'm going to go back to my server project here. And if I go to startup class, I am adding use authentication and authorization here. And then I'm creating authentication state provider as I'm adding authentication state provider as a service in my application. But I created this custom authentication state provider. I did not use that revalidating state provider. I used custom authentication, which I created from the scratch so that I could have full control over how my database is structured, what all methods that I want to create, if I want to use JWT or not. So I'm gonna go to this class. This class has three main methods. One is get authentication state provider, which I'm overriding. And the reason why I'm overriding is because I'm inheriting authentication state provider as a class. And if once I inherit it, then I'll have to override it because it has that abstract method in it. And I'm, authentication state provider is inherited by authentication state provider, and then defining this get authentication state. So this method, this class will help me log in the user, log out the user, and maintain the state of the user, maintain that if the user is logged out or logged in. I want my application to remember that if the user is authorized, authenticated or not. So this class will help me do that. If I open this get authentication state, this gets called when you first time load the application, when you log in the application, and if you refresh your page. This is the method which gets called so that you don't lose the state. You're making that signal or connection with the server. You don't want, once you refresh the page, the signal or connection gets refreshed, and how do you maintain the state? So that's how this get authentication state helps us in maintaining the state of the user. So I created this custom authentication state provider, and then I have these three methods which are helping me mark user as authenticated and mark user as logged out, right? So where are we using it though? If I go back to my startup class, excuse me, I'm adding this custom authentication state provider as a concrete class, and authentication state provider is the abstract class here. And if I go to my login page here, if I go to my login pages, I'm injecting this authentication state provider, and on the login click, I'm converting that authentication state provider into custom authentication state provider to mark my user as authenticated if the user is, excuse me, valid. And if I go to my main layout here, here also I'm injecting authentication state provider, and I'm converting authentication state provider into custom authentication state provider, and I'm marking user as logged out. Let's run this and see how this works. First, I'll have to bring in the web API here. So I'm gonna go to its terminal and run this .NET run. Maybe it is already running. Hang on. Okay, it's running now. So my web API is running. I'm gonna go and run my Blazor server application. For that, I'm gonna open another terminal here. I might have to run this in debug mode. The reason why I'm not running in debug mode is because I already have Chrome open. It might not. Okay, so I'm gonna run this in release mode. Okay, awesome. So this application is, it has this login page that we just looked at. Where did the login page go? Yeah, this is where the login page is, where I injected my authentication state provider that we created in a class, which is this class. And we know we have these get authentication state async, we have mark user as logout, and mark user as authenticated. So if I click on this login button, it's gonna log in into the system. It's gonna say that Philip Kramer is logged in. It has that logout button, and I can access my application here. If I click on logout, it's going to bring me back to my application here. And if I log in with John Smith, I think the password is also johnsmith.com. Yeah, so I can get into the system and John Smith gets logged in into the system. So, and if I click on find out about user, I'm not sure if this is going to work. It's been a while since I've started this application, but you can in this application, I can log in into the system and maintain the state of the user. Even if I refresh the page where the SignalR connection gets rebuilt, it's going to go to this get authentication state async method that we override, and it's going to, I'm using JWT here, which I have explained in my applications too. But basically what it's doing, it's getting the user by the token, it's getting the claims identity for it, and then we are assigning, and that's what we are sending it back as the return type, which is authentication state. I'm creating new authentication state and I'm passing claims principal here from my custom database. Let's look at the database tables for that. If I can connect to SQL Server. So I'm using SQL Express for that, and I have bookstores database, and I created my own tables here. And there are not a whole lot of tables. I have this user table. If I look into this table, that's where all my users are. I have Philip Kramer somewhere, Philip Kramer, and then I had John Smith as the last user. So I can, create my own custom database, even if I'm coming from if I'm migrating an application to Blazor server and you already have these database tables, you can use this, and you can use this custom authentication state provider to maintain your state. Now let's talk about Blazor WebAssembly. I'm gonna close this. One thing that I wanted to show was, if you wanted to, I'm gonna go to shared here and in main layout. Yes, so here I wanted to talk about these components, which is authorized view and authorized and not authorized. So if you want to show some of the UI, so you saw that we saw that logout button when we were authorized. We couldn't see that logout button when we were not authorized view. It was directly kicking us out of the application. And if you're not authorized and you want to show something, you can use this not authorized component. One thing that you will have to do, there is one more thing that you need to do, which is if you go to your app.razor component, which is where the router is sitting, that's like the starting point of the application. Here also you'll have to set that authorized route view, because if the ASP.NET Core routing finds your map, then the default layout is mapped to main layout, and the route data, the parameters are sent. But you'll have to use authorized route view if you want to use this custom state authentication provider. So this is kind of a main step. There are 3 things that you need to do. One thing is enable your application with authentication and authorization, and make sure that you're injecting, you're first creating custom authentication state provider and adding as a service. creating a custom authentication state provider would be the second step, where you're making sure that you're creating mark user as authenticated and mark user as logged out, which we are actually calling in login method, mark user authenticated. And in main layout, I'm calling mark user as logout when I click on logout. So you have to create those methods in custom authentication state provider. And then in app.razor, you have to use authorize route view, where you whatever custom authentication that state provider that you're creating, you can pass that in this route view so that your application can maintain the state of the user. And also, if it's not found, you can use cascading authentication state here. Okay, so that's all about server. It's a little different. It's actually a lot different when it comes to Blazor WebAssembly. So I'm going to quickly go over that. I'm going to just show the slide for that. So when we managed to do that pretty easily with Blazor server. When we created authentication, which was out of the box, it created a database for us. When we used custom authentication, we had our own database, and we created custom authentication state provider, and everything was happening on the server side. But when you talk about Blazor WebAssembly is something which runs natively on the browser. So, authentication could get a little tricky there. But the best part about Blazor WebAssembly is you can have ASP.NET Core as the hosted. You can have that as a backend service, and you can write authentication, authorization, mostly authentication on the server side. And you write mark user as logged in or logged out methods on the server side, and you need a state provider on the client side so that you can let your application know, your UI components know if the user is logged in or not. So in the server side, we had mark user as authenticated, mark user as logged out, and there was get authentication state provider. Here we have HTTP context sign in async, HTTP context sign out async, and to get the current user, we have HTTP context user. I'm going to first create an application which comes out of the box, and then we'll jump on to the application that I've already created with custom authentication. So this time I'm going to create a Blazor server application. I'm going to put it in GitHub and not interview preparation. I'm going to put it in .NET Meetup here. And I'm going to call it as WebAssembly off. Okay. And then click on create. Here it's going to ask us if I want to create a Blazor server application or Blazor WebAssembly application. So I'm going to create Blazor WebAssembly application this time. And here I'm going to change the authentication to individual user account and store user account in app. Select that, and I'm going to make sure that I have ASP.NET Core hosted as my backend. So I'm going to take that and then click on create. This will create an application which will have my UI in Blazor WebAssembly, my backend in ASP.NET Core, and that ASP.NET Core will have authentication support which comes out of the box. Before I jump onto the client, you can see that now it created 3 projects. Let's first talk about this project, and then I'll talk about where the authentication code is. If I look at the solution, I have 3 projects. One is client, server, and shared. And client is where the WebAssembly project is. Server is where you have these controllers where you can make web API calls. And shared project is basically a class library which you can use for sharing your models. If I'm going to go to server project, let's first run this and then we'll talk about the code. So I'm going to first run this and then we will talk about the code. Here I'm going to say .NET run. that will build my project and run it on, I think, 5001. Awesome. So it's gonna run it on 5001. I'm gonna go to my browser here and open a new tab and put it there. Now, when we created Blazor server application, I opened console and I showed you that it had created this SignalR connection to handle the UI requests. But if I open console right now, you can see that it is loading some assemblies here. This application is built in blah, blah, blah. If I open this and open this object, you can see that these DLLs are getting loaded, which DLLs is dynamic link library, which is, .NET's way of compiling to assemblies. And these DLLs are literally pushed on the browser, and they use .NET runtime in WebAssembly to use these libraries. If I refresh this page, it looks much nicer, I believe. Yeah, this is how it looks like. So these are the libraries which are included in our project, and these libraries are pushed on the browser, and we are using .NET runtime to use these libraries in the browser. If I go to my network here, refresh this page, we'll try to do this again. If I go to, there was this .NET Blazor WebAssembly callback. My tabs are not working right today. I'm sorry about that, but I could have shown you that, the .NET runtime, there's like okay, there you go. There's this .NET JS, .NET 5.0.1 JS, which helps you use the .NET runtime in the browser and, use these libraries. I'm gonna close out of that, and then just like we had, I'm gonna click on these buttons again. The fetch data page, I believe, is authorized. I think that's how they did it, but that's okay. We'll go back to it again. So this application is just like Blazor server application. We have home and counter. And if I try to click on it, my page is not reloading because .NET runtime is now running in the browser. I'm using everything natively in the browser. I don't need to make contact to server in order to perform anything. But if I click on register, then the page loads. One thing that I forgot to mention in Blazor server is like the page was not reloading when I was logging in into the system or trying to register a user, but it's using Razor pages, and that's the reason why it it reloads the application. And I'm not a big fan of it, but for using ASP.NET identity, they must have done it that way. Here I'm going to, now before I create the user, I want to show that I do not, I'm gonna disconnect from here. And I'm gonna show that I have this MVC movie context DB. I was studying for an interview here. And if I refresh it, these are the only databases that I have. And I'm gonna go to my application here again, and I'm gonna try and create John Smith. And use a secure password, and then click on register. And it's going to throw an exception again. It's going to say that we could not open the database, which was very similar to Blazor server. And here I'm going to go to app settings again and say that I don't want these long names. I just want a proper name, which is WebAssembly auth. That's fine. I'm going to save that JSON file and refresh the page. And it will say that this is going to now try and create WebAssembly auth as the database. If I click on, I'm going to go to actually data and show you the migrations, just like we had migrations on Blazor server. Here, if I apply on migration, and it's going to say that try try refreshing the page. Before I try refreshing, let's refresh this database and see if it created the database or not. So I can see my database getting created in WebAssembly auth here. WebAssembly auth as my database name here. And it created all the users that how it created for Blazor server application. I'm going to refresh my page and try confirm the account, log in. I'm going to try and the password is not right, so I'm going to say password. If I click on login, and now I can get logged in into the system. Even if I go to fetch data page now that I'm logged in, I can see this page. Previously, when I clicked on fetch data, it was asking me to log in into the system because it uses that authorized tag. If I go to my pages, not those pages, these pages. If I go to fetch data, it uses an authorized attribute on top of the page. So if the user is not logged in, then they won't be able to see this page because this is the attribute that we're using for this Blazor component. Okay, so this is what Blazor WebAssembly and its authentication is. Like I said, I don't it gets difficult to migrate your existing application. So how can we do it custom? For that, I've already created an application, and let's take a look at it. Close solution, and I'm gonna try and open Blazing Chat. So this is another application that I created in. I'm gonna close this. I created in on my YouTube channel where I used MVVM and I used Entity Framework Core, and I'm using SQLite database for this. But with Entity Framework Core, there are so many database providers, you can almost use any database that you like. So before I explain what's happening in the code, let's first run this application. To run this application, I'm going to right click on the server, go to its terminal, and kick this off. Let's see .NET 1. And the application is running. Copy this and go to the address. Now I have this application where it's asking for a login credentials, John Smith, and John Smith's email address and the password. And here I want you to pay attention on the right top corner here. It's saying login. It's showing login button right now, but once I click on login here, it's going to change that panel to Hello John Smith. And you get the logout button now because John Smith is logged in, and you can check some other pages here too. Once I click on logout, it's going to get me back on to my login page here. I'm going to go back to my slides here again to show you that how it's exactly working. So like I said, when we created application, we have client and then we have server. On the client side, we have to enable authentication. And we have to enable authentication on the server too. But on server, we'll have these three methods, and on the client, we'll have these three methods where basically buttons, login and logout buttons, and authentication state providers, so that we can maintain the state of the user. So if I go to my startup class here again, I am making sure that I'm using authentication. I've not used authorization yet on this application, but in the future, I'm going to do that. And I'm using authentication here. I'm not injecting I'm not adding any state provider on the server side because server is going to maintain the state in the cookie. If you see this service add authentication, and the default scheme that I'm adding is the cookie authentication. So it's going to maintain the state of the user on the server side in a cookie. And I'm going to have a state provider on the client side, which is going to make calls to the server so that it could get information from that cookie. So if I go to my controller here and user controller here, just like we had three methods on the server side, Blazor server, login, logout, and get current state, we have three methods as web API calls here on the WebAssembly side, on the server side of the WebAssembly project. So I have get current user, logout user, and login user. When I log in the user, I am using entity framework code to make sure that the user is there. If we find the user, then I'm creating claims identity, claims principal, and putting that claims principal in ASP.NET signing async and sending that user back to the client. So it's important to figure out where I'm making this call from. So if I go to my client project here and then open my login page, here I am making, whenever I click on login button, which is right here, I'm calling login user. Login user is a method here, and it's going to open, it's making a call to a view model. So let's go to that view model. If I go to that view model here, login view model. Yeah. So here, if you look at it, I'm calling this login view model, and I'm sending the user that I've gotten from the UI to my web API. So user login, which is the user controller here. This is the HTTP post method that I'm calling from my view model, which is actually getting called from my login tracer component. So that gets called here. But then the important point is, how does it maintain the state of the user? So once I log in, and then if I navigate, even if I refresh, then the state of the user stays there. So how are we doing that? To do that, I'm going to call this get current user method, which is also a web API. To call that user, first we are going to need to store this current user, right? So I'm gonna, just like we created a custom authentication state provider on the Blazor, we have custom authentication state provider on the Blazor WebAssembly too, excuse me. And here also I'm inheriting from authentication state provider. It's a custom state authentication state provider. That's the name of the class. And here we have this get authentication state async method, just like we had in Blazor server application. And here I'm calling that get current user. So whenever I first load the application or refresh the application or click on login, this method gets called, and I wanted to go and get the current user, which I'm going to get from this user identity is authenticated. So if the user is authenticated, if the cookie is already there on the server, then I can get that information. I can find what's the email address of the logged in user, then find more information about the user and send it back to the client. And this is the user that you're looking for. So this is the get current user. Now, the third step is to log out the user. To log out the user, it's pretty simple. I'm calling HTTP context and I'm calling this sign out, and it gets signed out. So let's see these cookies in action. I think I can show that from the application, I believe. If I refresh this, the user is already logged in, and that's the reason why I can see these cookies here. Once I log out the user, you can see that the cookie went away. If I log in the user, I can see this ASP.NET Core, and that's where the user information is stored, and that's how we are calling this ASP.NET Web API on the server side to get information about the current user. Now, just like we had to add custom authentication state provider as a service on the startup class. Here, if you look at this client side, we don't have that startup class, but we do have that program.cs class. And here I am adding this custom authentication state provider as a service. And then just like on the Blazor server application, we had authorize route view, and I have this authentication state provider, so that injected whatever custom authentication state provider that you put in, it can handle if the user is authorized or not. It can check if the current state of the user. And once you're done with that, then I'm going in my view model. I'm not injecting my authentication state provider in my Razor component, because this was the second project that I'd created using Blazor, and I wanted to use MVVM in it, and I wanted to keep the Razor component separate from what's happening from the application logic. I wanted to only have UI components and UI events related things on the server side, and on the business logic will be there in view model on the server side. So if I go to my login view model here again, you can see that here I'm calling post JSON to make that login user. And then I don't think we need to inject that anywhere. My bad. Here we need to just make a post call to get the current user or log in the user, or if I want to log out the user, then I can go to my main layout here, main layout, and then I have HTTP client, and then I'm calling this logout user, which is another, the third web API call that we used for logging out the user. And the custom state authentication state provider that gets injected, that doesn't get injected per se, but it gets used through application by these cascading authentication state and this authorized route view. So this is how you can have authentication either out of the box, which comes you can create either through command line, or you can create just like I created from Visual Studio, or you can use custom authentication state provider by inheriting authentication state and following those main 3 steps in order to integrate custom authentication and not worry about, and you don't have to follow the design, the schema for ASP.NET ASP.NET roles and users database. You can have your own database structure for handling authentication. With that, I think I'm gonna take some questions. But before I take some questions, whatever I just went, the applications that I just showed you, the Blazing Chat application or the Bookstores application, both of them are on GitHub. I can show you I can share that link with you all. So the Bookstores application that I was just talking about, the Phillips Kramer, on GitHub, all the course source. I learned a lot from making this Bookstores application. While making the tutorial, I did not have a good experience as a YouTuber, so I did not know how to maintain the code and have it episode by episode, but I learned that lesson from my Bookstores application, and I maintain all the episodes and the code associated with it. And this Blazing Chat application is actually fully baked. That you can find all its code on the first application. I'm dealing with some CSS things. I'm using SignalArt for chatting, and like we saw authentication, and I also have I wanted to show this, but this is currently not working. Maybe next time, where you can you can sign in with Twitter or Facebook or Google by using their packages. If you go to startup, you can see that I've added their support here. For some reason, it's not working. I need to look into it. It's giving some cross-origin read blocking issue that happened this morning, but I wanted to show how it's working. It was working. It's not working right now. And with that, I'm going to take some questions.
We did have a question earlier on about Identity Server 4. Mm-hmm. Looks like would you recommend OpenID or Identity Server 4? Or have any experience, thoughts?
I do not have that much of experience. I would use Identity Server 4 because it's been there longer. I can comment on that, but I haven't had experience, like I haven't used it in like a full-blown application to tell you which one is better, you know?
What's been the biggest? Yeah, what's been the biggest gotcha or most fun part digging into Blazor client side, server side?
I think one disadvantage that I would say is that it's pretty new, and I'll show you a website. It's my website. This is curiousdrive.com, and you know I'm working on this website so that I can maintain all my courses on this website, and people can navigate between courses, and if they want to watch it, they can watch it from here. So I'm building this is in progress. The best thing about this is I'm hosting this on ASP. On Azure Static Web Apps. So an Azure Static Web Apps free, you know, it's you don't have to pay for it. You also get this SSL certificate, so you don't have to pay for that either. So, you know, having that processing on the browser side, I don't have to have a server in order to host a website. That's been pretty awesome, and that's been new. The gotchas, I would say authentication could get a little tricky. Working with WebAssemblies and Signal, it's, you know, people are not used to it. We are used to like HTTP post and GET and, you know, like your regular HTTP calls. So it's new. There are some Visual Studio tools which they're still working on. Actually, they had a Blazor team introduction, I think, on Twitch on Visual Studio channel. And they were talking about like how hot reload is going to come, where while you're making changes in your code, your UI is going to get refreshed, just like, you know, it works in Xamarin. So these are the kind of things that they're working right now. The development experience has been little okay because you know, it's still new. Working with IntelliSense in your so if I open one of the components here, I can show you. If I open, let's open login page. So, you know, you have some HTML code here, and then if you have this @ code, you can write C#. So mixing these HTML and C# it's been a little challenging for them to have that tooling properly, and sometimes the IntelliSense and formatting could get a little messy, and it's a little annoying. But I believe in Blazor team, and I think it's pretty cool, and I think that it's nice that we are now using WebSockets and WebAssemblies to host these applications.
Has there been anything new with the .NET 5 release in November that improved things significantly?
There was an article that they released Blazor. Let me see if I can find it on .NET 5 features. The biggest was, let's see if I can find that. Hang on. Currently, I can't. They usually like release an article where you can see it, but I'm not finding it right now. But that's okay because the biggest was they increased the performance. The performance was a little, it wasn't great because the way the components are getting initialized, and if you're using a big component like grid view where you're showing like thousands of records, then the way the inner components are getting initialized and getting mapped to DOM. So that was a little tricky. They came up with this another component called as virtualize, I think, and which made it super fast, and the performance has been better. They have this CSS isolation where you can you don't have to keep all your CSS in one file. You can have different CSSs for different reason components. They did that. The debugging experience got better. See, the debugging is very tricky when it comes to Blazor WebAssembly, because what's happening is you're pushing all of your code on the browser, and then you have to connect your code back to Visual Studio so that you can debug your WebAssembly. So that was a little tricky for them. It wasn't good, but that got improved with .NET 5 with Blazor server. In .NET 5, they added auto refresh, so you can run .NET in watch mode, and then if you can code, and at the same time the page gets refreshed. It's kind of like a hot reload functionality, but they call it auto refresh because it's not really hot reload, because your application is stopping and getting restarted.
All right, chat. Any more questions out there? Feel like we're winding down. Wanted to be sure to post all the links to everything. Here is where you can follow on Twitter. Of course, the Curious Drive channel on Twitch.
Yeah. I do have this channel where I mostly try to make tutorials. I recently made JavaScript tutorial because I wanted to help. I felt like I was making videos for intermediate developers and not contributing in the community to people who are just getting started with programming. These videos are completely free. I'm not even putting ads on them. I made there are like around 40 videos right now. So I highly recommend that please share this with anyone who who's getting into programming, or they already know a language and want to learn JavaScript. Then then they can watch these videos. On Twitch, I play coding games where you get like 15 minutes, and then there's like a coding problem that you have to solve in 15 minutes. I stream that mostly on Fridays and Mondays. But with recently, I myself was looking for a job, so I haven't been punctual there, but hopefully I'll get back on it.
Excellent. I just want to say, so I was waiting to see if anybody had any more questions, but I want to say thank you a lot for the WebAssembly version of the authentication. I've had the server side working for a while, and I was looking at the documentation that Microsoft provided for WebAssembly authentication, which looked completely different than server side authentication. So I went down the route that Microsoft was showing me, which is a never ending rabbit hole of fail.
Yeah.
So the fact that you realized that the same state provider will work for WebAssembly is super awesome, because I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. And, the code is already there on GitHub. But if you're looking for that particular video, then you can go to my channel, and here I have this custom authentication Blazor WebAssembly. Hopefully, I think the ad will pay now. But, I'm even using VS Code, and I'm like step by step where, things are not live, where I have time to record and, filter noises and everything. So it's a 31-minute video where I'm going step by step and actually typing what I'm doing. So this will be very helpful for you if you're into it.
Yeah, I'm gonna look at it and your GitHub repo
Yeah.
to see if I need to make any adjustments for the work I've been doing for work. But
Yeah,
that's been a
definitely.
big sticking point for me for the last month or something, which makes me feel pretty stupid, but whatever.
No, no. I completely understand. I struggled with it too. So I decided in 2019, I decided, okay, I'm gonna make this video series about Blazor. I know everything about Blazor, and I started reading documents and I started creating videos. And when I came to the point where I had to talk about authentication, I couldn't move ahead. I was reading documents, I was talking to different people, I was reading blogs, and I was like, how I want to finish this video series, but I don't know how to do authentication. These documents are not helping. So that made me realize like how much people need this, and I put my heart and soul into while I was making it.
It's really appreciated, at least on my end. I'm sure others will too.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, great presentation. We're actually wrapping up here, so welcome Deflux K. Appreciate you joining us. If you wanted to follow along, be sure to subscribe. You can catch the replay of the video. We will also back this up to YouTube as well. No problem about arriving late. There's no time limit. We'll have the videos available, but we will be here again next month. The second Tuesday of the month. Every month we'll have a special guest for the syncbeat.net meetup until we can get back in person. Even when we do go back to in-person events, we will still do the live streaming to Twitch. Clayton and I will be back with our partner in crime on the Six Figure Developer channel tomorrow night, doing the live coding at 8 p.m. Eastern. So feel free to join us there. And Monday evenings at 6 p.m. for the podcast. Yeah, we've got links to everything in chat. So if you scroll back through or watch, rewind and rewatch, we will do the Twitch thing and raid our friend over at TBD Gamer if there are no more questions. But appreciate everybody for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.